Okay, so today we're going to make a calculator in Python. And so far, what we have done in Python programming is we have started to learn about some of the basic codes. And in this project, we are going to make a GUI. And we're going to make a calculator that looks and feels just like the Windows calculator. It's going to have a bunch of buttons on it where we can push the buttons, and I could do 5 plus 7, and it's going to respond with the answer of 12. It's going to have a clear all button, so I could do another equation, 8 divided by 5, and that equals 1.6. And it's going to look like this. So this is going to be our first real project. And previously in our project, we've had just 2 or 3 or 4 lines of code. Today we're going to make a much larger program, and it might have 100 plus lines of code, 200 plus lines of code. And so it's going to be much more complex. So one of the first things I want to talk about is that we are going to have to put comments in. And when programs become big, you really need to put comments so that the comments are going to tell anyone who's looking at the code what it's all about and to make it easier to understand. And it's going to seem a little annoying at first, but if you ever want to get a job programming, it will be expected of you. It's also quite likely that you'll begin your career as a debugger if you're get into programming, someone who tests and fixes another programmer's code. And it's the comments that you're going to rely on as your guide to understand what's going on. And in this project, it's going to be what I'm going to rely on if I'm trying to help you debug, or it'll also be what your fellow classmates are going to rely on when they're trying to help you to debug as well. So in Python, to create a comment, we use the pound character or the hashtag. And in this project, I'm going to get you to start with putting at the very top a comment. So we put the hashtag. And then I'm going to get you to put in your name at the very top. And then a little description of what it is and the date that we start the project. So we're going to start today. So your code will look something like what you see on the screen right now. Great. Next, we're going to create some buttons. And that's going to be the hard part. To create the buttons, we're going to use Tkinter. And so you'll notice here, this is my Python program, and it's not running in the shell. I'm not using the console to sort of see what's going on. What we're doing is we're using a GUI. And so there's a library called Tkinter. It's one of the popular ones. And just like using any other library, what we need to start with is doing an import. And so you're going to start with putting an import, and I'll get you to write at the very top something like this: from Tkinter, import star, which means everything. And we're also going to take the font in, so we're going to import Tkinter, the font, as font. So you're going to write that as the very top. And so what that does is all the codes that are created in Tkinter that do the drawing of, what a button does, the action of a button as it presses, it goes down, text box as you get input from the keyboard, it displays a cursor to insert and so forth. All those things are already coded for us. So we just have to import it. And then our job is to put and use the codes as we see necessary. Okay, so I'm going to talk about making a font first. So even before we get started. Now you can, if you don't use font, it'll just display the default font. But as you can tell, I've worked and made this program, and to make it so it looks pretty reasonable and things fit in here nicely, what I've found is I wanted to use the Courier font, size 20 and bold. I thought that worked well. So how do you add a font? Well, it's pretty easy. What we do is to define the font. We can use the font here. So we've already imported it. And I make up my font. So I call it Mr. Poy's font. It's going to equal font.capital font. And again, watch out for the capitals as you do these. And it's going to be the family of font is Courier. Again, you can put whatever font you want, but the Courier worked well. I'm also going to give it a size. In this case, the font size of 20. And a font weight of bold, make it sort of stand out a bit. Okay, the next thing I need to do is I'm going to initialize Tkinter. So I want to make a window that is going to display Tkinter. So I want a window, and let me just go back to my calculator here. This is the window. So the window has a place for buttons and text boxes and all sorts of different objects. And in Tkinter, they call it widgets. So buttons are a widget, a text box is a widget, a combo box, a drop-down box, a picture box, all those things are widgets. So I'm going to make a window, and the window, although it's different on Mac, it'll look a little bit different. In Windows, you have a little dash, square, and X for minimize, restore, and close. And in Mac, it's a little different. But automatically, it will have the right ones. And so I'm going to define a window. And so what I'm going to do is, even before I define my font, I'm going to start by saying the window that's going to be displayed is equal to capital T. This threw me the first time I saw it because I didn't have my glasses on and I didn't notice it was a capital T, and I kept getting an error. So it's a capital T, a lowercase k. And so we define the window, and so that will make the window. And I can change some properties of the window. For example, in the title, you can put your name and then calculator, and you'll see it will display at the top. So now I've got a window, and I've got a font for when I put buttons or text boxes in my calculator. Okay, so how do we define a text box? And so it's called a widget. And so I'm going to create a text box widget, and there's it's not really all that complicated. What I'm going to do, and I like to use, because I come from a background of programming in Visual Basic, I use lower three case letters TXT to sort of remind me what it's all about, and then I call it display. So my text box for displaying is going to be an entry widget, they call it. It's going to display in the window. Its width is going to be 21. I can make it wider, but I know with the buttons and the font I've used, 21 is going to be the perfect width. You'll see it fits just very nicely in this window. I set a border width, so a little border of 5 pixels. And the font that I want to use in the text box is like this. Now, I'm going to run the program, and nothing's going to happen. But I still want to run, well, something will happen. Let me just run the program here. So let's call this, let me save it in programming 11, and I'll call this step 1 calculator. .py. And I run it, and there you go. And people are like, okay, this didn't really work, Mr. Poy. I see the title there, and it is a window, but there's no text box. Don't worry, I was expecting that. Let me show you what we have to do next. So not only do you need to define the text box, but you got to place it onto your screen. So to place it onto your window, what we do is there's a couple different ways to do it. One, you can use the place method, or another, we're going to use something called the grid method. And so what we're going to do is we're going to say text display, and then we're going to use our method, which is grid, and then that comes in parentheses. So what's inside the grid parentheses So textDisplay.grid is going to put it on the screen. But let's pass to this method a couple of attributes. One being the row to put it in, and the column. And that's the way the grid works. The grid is basically a table of rows and columns that you can tell it where to place the different objects on. And so we're going to start with the first row. And a lot of people would think, that should be row 1, shouldn't it? That's usually the way I count first. But just like so many things you're going to see in Python, when we start to count, we often will count with 0 as being the first valid place to put something. So row 0 is going to be that first place. Next, I'm going to I go down a row to row 0, so at the very top. The next is column, so from left to right, we start counting. So the first column is column 0. So there's only one column. And then this is going to be unique, and I thought I would just introduce this in the beginning. If you looked at my calculator, you'll remember there was, we had 4 or so buttons on it. And the top row of the calculator had a CE, a C, a del, and a division sign to it. And so do I have it running? No, I don't. But we need to span all 4 columns. So now I'm just going to quickly run this program, and you're going to see, there's a window with a text box where I can put numbers or any sort of text. Great, so we're getting there. That's how you create a text box. Next thing I want to do is I'm just going to create a couple of buttons. So in here, I'll just create, let me just create a couple of buttons. I'll show you how they look. So I'll quickly just copy and paste them on here. So I'm going to make a button. And again, coming from my Visual Basic background, I use BTN, lowercase btn, to indicate that this is a button, and then a descriptive word. Now, I don't have to be too descriptive. For example, maybe I'm going to make a clear button. So the clear button, I would call BTN clear. But if I've got the button that's going to display the number 2 in it, I'm just going to call it button 2. So let's make this one here button clear. And I will put a C right here for clear. So let's take a look at what we put in here. So to define it, we define it as capital B button. So that's the widget, the button widget. We use the entry widget here for the text box, the button widget here for making a button. We're going to place it in the window, or we want to use the window. The text we want for the number 2 button is going to be called just 2. The text for the clear button, I'm going to put a C in, for example. We can give it some padding for X and some padding for Y. I tell it what font to use. And then I need to tell it what to do when I click on that button. And so I'm going to say the command when clicked is going to be the function button clicked. Now, some of you are probably saying, we haven't made a function yet for this program. Aha! Let me make a function, and I can define it right up here at the top here. Let's make a function, and I'll call it button underscore clicked, and then parentheses, and I can put some code in here. Let's say x equals 1. I'll just give you some code. We're not going to do anything. This doesn't really do anything. It makes a variable x and assigns it a value of 1. So now that this is going to have a value of 1, I've got a button that's going to be clicked, and it's going to do that code when I press the button. But just like the text box, nothing is going to happen because I haven't displayed it with the grid. I need to use the grid. So let's use the grid and see if I can display the first couple of buttons. So let me just take some code here that I've done, and I'll just quickly, let me put a comment. Display buttons. So remember what we did. We could say button clear, I can put that in the grid in row 1 in column 0. I can then put button 2, which I have defined right here. That's going to have the number 2 on it. Let's put it in row number 1, column 1, so it'll be in the second position. Button 3, I'm going to put in the grid, row 1. Let's put in the second position. And then finally, I'm going to put button 4, and to place it, I use .grid. So I am going to place it in the grid. It's going to be in the row, first row, and the column will be the third column. So there you have it. I've now made and placed one row of buttons, and if I run the program now, this is where I think we'll wrap up today. You'll see I've got a calculator, I've got a C button, and then a number 2, number 3, and number 4. Okay, so what I want you to do is I want you to create the calculator with a text box and buttons using the information that I've given you in this video. And the last thing we need to do is we need to make it so that it's going to look like this. So text box at the top, a CE button, a C button, a del button, a division button, a 7, 8, 9 on the next row, a 4, 5, 6, and a minus on the next row, a 1, 2, 3, and a plus on the next row, negative, 0, decimal, and equals on that row. And that's hopefully where you can get to. And then we'll start to learn how we can program and create functions that are going to work with doing each of these.